a video on this malt vinegar that I've been aging in a barrel in an oak barrel for now 2 months. So we can see that the malt vinegar is wanting to kind of come through. Well, it started to stain the wood, because obviously the wood's not completely waterproof, and we get a little bit of liquid trying to kind of come out. So in whiskey, when you make whiskey, some of the alcohol evaporates out of the barrel, and that's called the angel's share. So by the time the barrel is, I've forgotten how old it needs to be, but say you lose a certain percentage of the whiskey as it gets older. So, but it's the same for anything that you're going to put in a barrel. So this malt vinegar will have lost some of its volume, and that's what those kind of stains are. So we're just in the utility room, so it's a little bit dusty, but I've not had the cap on properly, so that's that there. And I'll give it a smell. You won't be able to smell it, obviously. So it's got that oaky kind of smell to it, which you get from a whiskey or a wine that's been aged, or anything that's been aged in an oak barrel. You get that oaky kind of smell to it. So I'm not going to turn the tap because I'm worried that it might break, and then it'll start to leak, and I'll have to do something with it. So what I'm going to do is, I've got a syringe, so I'll just stick the syringe in the top, and we'll pour out can we see in there? I don't think you can see in, but we'll pour out a sample of the vinegar, and we'll give it a taste, and then we'll taste all the other vinegars and vinegary-ish experiments that I've had going on for the last 2 months as well. So it'll be like this will be a update on all the vinegars that I am faffing around with. This is the array of vinegars then. So this is, we'll try the the oak barreled aged malt vinegar first. So it doesn't look like it's massively changed in colour, but we'll give it a taste. 2 months should have made a difference. Like wow. Like wow. It's really picked up that oaky kind of flavour. It's not as sharp as it was. I mean, malt vinegar is just like when you taste it. So it's changed, and of course it would change because it's been open to the air slightly. So that's going to change the vinegar in kind of flavour, but it's really taken on that oak barrel flavour. So that's kind of quite interesting. Now, this is the vinegar that I had in the vinegar pots at work that during the summer I'm not at work that much, so the vinegar doesn't really get used, and so a mother forms on the bottom of the vinegar, and there's nothing wrong with the vinegar, but you just kind of think to yourself, oh, I can't have that slimy mother in the bottom of the malt vinegar. The customers won't like it, they'll think it's gone off. It hasn't gone off, it's just formed a mother, and it's just mellowed the vinegar in flavour. So, and this was kind of quite this is the reason why I've aged some malt vinegar, because of the way this kind of tasted. It started tasting really fruity and not as astringent as the normal malt vinegar. Yeah, so it's got that. I mean, it's still vinegar, but it's got like a real fruity flavour to it. I don't know why. Should be washing my spoon every kind of time, shouldn't I? So this one happened by accident. Now these two are what I did on purpose. So it's all very well me aging some malt vinegar in an oak barrel, but you're not going to be able to get your hands on an oak barrel. Well, you will. You can get your hands on an oak barrel, but it's expensive. And so if we can do something a little bit cheaper and make things less expensive, I think that's always a good idea. So I'll actually move the camera slightly so you'll be able to see the mother that's formed on the top of these two experiments. So as you can see there, a mother has formed on top of these malt vinegars. Now, mothers have been formed before in these malt vinegars, but what's happened is they've fallen down to the bottom of the, you just see there, just see that line there, that's a mother there, and that's a mother there. So the problem is when you start to disturb vinegar, let me just put this back on. When you start to disturb the vinegar, the mother wants to fall down to the bottom of the bottle. So the idea of these was that we would be able to age some malt vinegar, but just do it in a glass bottle. And I kind of think, well, if you can all get your hands on a glass bottle, and you can buy some cheap malt vinegar, and we can age it and kind of improve its flavour and make it more interesting. So this was the older one. So this was the vinegar that I took from the vinegar pots from work. So this is slightly older than that one, and that was just some vinegar we poured out of a fresh bottle. But as you can see, the mother is wanting to move, and no doubt this one will fall down to the bottom of the bottle. Yeah, it's going to fall down to the bottom of the bottle, but whatever. So that has mellowed in flavour. It's still malt vinegary, but it's certainly a lot more interesting. So that will have been going for about 3 months, I think, about 3 months. So I certainly made a video on aging these before, and we were up about maybe 2 months. It's about a month since then, maybe a little bit more. So this is the one that I just bought from I bought some malt vinegar, and I put it into a glass bottle with a bit of cloth over the top and a rubber band just to kind of keep it in place. So it's open to the air, but things can't fall into it. This time of year there's flies, there's moths, there's that type of thing. We don't want those in contaminating our vinegar. So that one is slightly more acidic, but kind of understandable, because the vinegar had already started to age when it was in the open vinegar pots at work. So that's interesting. Let's get those out of the way so I don't knock them over. Those are interesting and something that you can do at home. You don't need an oak barrel. Now, what next? Right, so this one, going on the malt vinegar theme, let's just wash that off. This is some wine that I added a malt vinegar mother to. So it didn't really work. I always kind of thought adding a mother to a wine, a vinegar mother to a wine, would turn it into vinegar quicker, but it didn't. And my only conclusion with that is that malt vinegar is made from the beer brewing process, and a white wine, and that's not the same as a white wine. So I deduce, I don't know if this is correct or not, that there are different, whether you're turning a beer or a wine or like a wine or a beer into a vinegar, it's a different type of mother. So you can't necessarily take a mother from a malt vinegar and use it and to turn a wine into a white wine vinegar. You need the certain type of, it's not a yeast, I forget what it is. It's some form of acid, I can't kind of quite remember. But it needs to be that type of thing. So if we think about, if we use the yeast from beer making to make a bread, it will work. We will be able to make a bread, but it won't taste very nice. And in the same way that we can't, it's not advisable to take a yeast that we make bread with and turn that into a brewer's yeast. There are different types of yeast, and that's the only way that I can kind of think that why it didn't work in this experiment. But it's now old enough that it's probably naturally turned into white wine vinegar, regardless of the mother being in the bottom. A little bit, but not much. A little bit, not much. But it was cheap wine from the supermarket, like the really kind of cheap stuff that I use in white wine sauces and cooking. Now, you're supposed to use, Market P.O. White said you really should use wine in cooking that you would drink yourself. We're not all on that budget, mate. So I always kind of think if we are cooking on a budget, we have to use cheaper wines. And cheaper wines are fine for making white wine sauces and poaching fish and all that kind of stuff. So that's okay. It's probably going to turn into vinegar eventually, but it'll take a long time. But we can, I don't know if you'll be able to pick up on the mother. The mother is there in the bottom, but it's almost like it's pickled the mother. Anyway, so this is the same cheap white wine, and with some wine crystals. So when wine goes off, it produces crystals, and I collected those crystals, and I put some of those crystals in the bottom of some wine, and I kind of thought, well, maybe it'll be like an experiment where you get it, like when you get a saline solution, salt water solution, and you start making salt crystals, and they kind of grow and get bigger and bigger and bigger. I kind of thought that might happen with the wine crystals, but it hasn't. They're just in the bottom of that, just in the, I don't know if we can see, just there. They might be moving around a little bit. So this might have turned into white wine vinegar, but it was cheap wine, and it tends to be a little bit sweet. Does the cheaper wine? I should have been washing this. I should wash that off. No. It tends to be a little bit sweet as the cheaper wines, probably to compensate for the flavour. There's not much flavour in it, so they keep it sweet, so it's not really kind of like astringent and not particularly very nice to drink. It's left sweet to kind of counterbalance that that kind of the acidity level in it. That would be my thoughts anyway. Kind of turned into vinegar slightly. Probably needs another good few months, but that's probably been going for about 4 months now, open to the air. So what's the next one? Don't know. Oh yeah, I know what the next one is. So the next one is actually the wine that I reduced down to turn it to see if it would form some wine crystals. So this is red wine, which I got the wine crystals on. That lid's gone, isn't it? You put a new lid on that. So this is when I was working in proper kitchens. I still work in a kitchen, but it's not. I don't view it as proper. It's function work. It's not like restaurant work. That's just my personal opinion. So I don't view it as like proper cooking. It's set meals, so it's not 10 different starters, 10 different main courses, 10 different puddings. So when I work, it's a set meal. It's a set starter, set main, set pudding, cheese and biscuits, coffee, mince, which is banquet catering, which is different. So I view working in proper kitchens with working on a section as proper kitchen work. Sounds quite insulting, but I am insulting myself. But anyway, so this, I noticed that when we reduced red wine to make a red wine sauce, if we left the red wine reduction, crystals started to form and it turned it off. So this was an experiment to reduce some red wine and see what happened with the crystals, and if we could collect some crystals, and what happened if we left it over time. So this is a reduced red wine. So there should be some crystals at the bottom of this. Yeah, there's a few there, like that, but we're not growing lots and lots and lots of crystals. So we'll give the reduced wine a taste and see what's happened to it. Maybe something interesting has happened. Actually, the wine flavour's kind of come back through with that. That's interesting. That's kind of quite interesting. That is interesting. It started to taste winey again. That's not unpleasant. That's not unpleasant. But I don't know what we can do with that. So what's next? This is some fruit juice that I added some vodka to see if it would turn into vinegar. Just as a kind of experiment. You know, could we take I forgot what, probably grape juice or something like that I added some vodka to get it down to the right alcohol content, and then see if it would turn. I took it down to like a wine volume of alcohol, so about 10% alcohol, and then just to kind of see if it would turn into a vinegar. I didn't know if I don't know enough about vinegar to kind of say that it would or wouldn't. So I kind of thought, well, let's just find out. No, that just tastes like fruity alcohol, like a 10% fruity alcohol. So that's not turning into vinegar, and that's probably coming up to 8 or 9 months old. Right now, this is, I fermented some coffee, and then it turned into alcohol. It turned into like fizzy, and then it turns into alcohol, and then I kind of thought, well, it'll turn into vinegar, and it did slightly turn vinegary. We are now 2 or 3 months It's now 2 or 3 months older, so in essence it should be more vinegary than it was. It started to turn vinegary, so we'll see. Certainly not the colour of coffee anymore. That's definitely turning into vinegar. That's definitely a lot more vinegary than it was. That's interesting. That's got some complexity to it, is that? And that's down to the coffee. So that is interesting. That is interesting that we can turn coffee into vinegar. So that certainly worked. Well, it did work before, but now it's turned even more vinegary, which is more of a success. So that works. I don't know what I'm going to do with that. We'll just keep it going and going and going. So at the same time as I made this coffee vinegar, I made some. Am I going to fight with this? Yes, I will not be beaten. It's not a competition. You don't have to win all the time. Now, this is. I had some whey from the yogurt which I fermented. Same process as the coffee. We can ferment it, it turns into a fizzy pot, and then it turns into an alcoholic fizzy drink, and then it turns into alcohol. And then, because it's turned into alcohol and it's fermented, it should turn into vinegar. And it started in the same way that the coffee did. It started to turn into a vinegar, but now we're a little bit further on. So it should now definitely be a lot more vinegary. We did 2. Now, this one has become a lot clearer, and this one hasn't. This one's got a little bit of a no, it's just, I don't know what's happened there. It might have still been fermenting quite a bit, but we'll see. So this is the old one. I did 2 batches of it. So let's see. That's definitely turned into vinegar. It'll need longer. There's no real kind of depth to that, and I suppose it's because we're only going to get depth from things if the flavour's already there. So I always kind of think you can ferment edible grapes, and it will produce a wine, but the wine hasn't got much kind of flavour to it because they're bred for sweetness, and sweet isn't very complex. Sweet flavours aren't very complex, in my opinion. You kind of want bitter things that you're going to ferment and turn into wine. So wine grapes, you can't eat them in the same way that you eat edible grapes. They are still edible, but they're not particularly very nice to eat, and it's because they are more complex in flavour and there's bitter flavours to them. So those bitter elements of the grapes translate into the wine. Now with the whey, it was sugar, it was a yeast. There's nothing really much complex going on there, although you do get complexities in cheese, which obviously whey comes from, but that whey happened to come from yogurt. So it's probably the complex elements of the milk have actually gone into the cheese, and the whey, there's kind of nothing much there. So this is cloudy for whatever reason. It probably just means that it hasn't just 100% finished fermenting and hasn't settled, or something's got into it. There's a lot more yeast in the bottom of that. But anyway, let's see what this one tastes like. It's certainly turned to vinegar, but it's not as vinegary for whatever reason. So those are interesting. Now, this is, I fermented for fun. I fermented some skins of melon and the skin of a pineapple, just out of fun. The idea was that I would make cut down on the food waste, and what else could we do with melon skin and pineapple skins? And I was thinking, well, we could ferment it and we could see what happens, and it worked. It fermented naturally. The pineapple skin took a little bit longer, but the melon skin started fermenting rather kind of quickly, and gave us this melon flavoured fizzy pop, which was rather kind of quite delicious. But I wanted to take that further, so what I did was we allowed it to finish fermenting, and then you kind of think, well, it turned from like these others, they start to ferment, you get a fizzy drink, and then you get a less fizzy alcoholic drink, and then it turns into alcohol, which kills the yeast, and then from the alcohol it turns into a vinegar if left open to the air. So this is the melon skin fizzy pop. let's see if this has turned into a vinegar. I think it will have. I think it will have. It's certainly on the way to turning into a vinegar. So the same would have happened with the pineapple skin, which is kind of quite interesting. So lots of people are into food waste and like cutting back on things in life. And if you could make your own vinegar relatively straight, easily from food waste, or ferment it into turning into we can add. Oh, I've got something else we can add as well. So if we can turn food waste into alcohol, ferment it into alcohol, it won't be a particularly very nice alcohol to drink, but then you can then turn it into a vinegar, and vinegar is a preservative and therefore kind of quite useful. Now, where is it? I was going to make this a separate video, but we might as well make it one of this. It's going to be a little bit long, this video. What we have, 18 minutes already, but I am not known for my short videos. I'm not really known for any videos, am I? This is, I'll get the vegetables out. So I took some food waste-ish type of thing. Where is it? Oh, it's here. So I took some food waste and I fermented it. Because I wanted to make like a fermented type of sauce. So carrot peelings, the end of leeks, the root bit of onions, kind of anything that you've got, like all the outside cabbage leaves, which are a little bit not particularly nice to eat, a little bit too bitter, and I fermented them and made a kimchi type of thing. There were putting some chili and some ginger in there, and it fermented. And then I kind of thought, well, we'll take these vegetables, we'll puree them up, and then extract the juice out of them. So those are pickled vegetables. That smells lovely, does that? That smells like the inside of a spring roll. So this is the juice from that process. So pureed it up, squeezed the juice out, ran it through a cloth to get all the sediment out of it, and then put it into a bottle. This is that liquid. And then, out of interest, I decided that what we'll do is we'll take 500 millilitres of that liquid and we'll reduce it down, and to kind of see what kind of happens when we reduce it down. So stick it in a pan, bring it up to boil, slowly simmer it, evaporate off some of the liquid, the water, and then it'll concentrate the kind of flavours. So this is just the fermented juice. It's like a fermented sauce, which I don't know what I'd use it for. It's nice. It's kind of, it's vegetable-y and it's salty. So I suppose you could, but isn't that what kimchi is? There's no meat in kimchi, whereas something like a Worcestershire sauce is fermented anchovies, so not vegetarian. But we could get a similar type of result from fermenting vegetables to make a vegan, vegetarian Worcestershire sauce. I suppose that's kind of what it is. But this is it reduced down, so it will be more concentrated and a lot more salty, which is what Lee & Perrin's Worcestershire sauce is, or Henderson's relish. There'll be others on the market as well. So what does this taste like? Kapow! That's really kind of quite salty, but it would give you that umami kick if you were to add it to things. So that's kind of quite interesting. That probably those probably would be a lot more interesting if they were aged, but that might be part of another video at some time in the future. So that is the update on all the vinegars I've been faffing with. One of my friends wants to come around to my house because I keep telling her about all these vinegars that I'm kind of faffing around with, and she thinks I've got this kind of like mad experiment kind of going on, like Frankenstein's lab. And it's just, to be honest, it's just these on my windowsill in the kitchen that are not in direct sunlight. You know what I mean? As a lab goes, it's kind of pretty boring. But an interesting update on all the vinegars that I'm faffing around with. Some work, some don't work. Some are interesting, some are really interesting, and some are just a bit bland. So, from that point of view, this is all very successful, and for me, lots of fun.